Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I hope you enjoyed that video as we come back from our back into our session for session 2. Our next session is on connecting through Sabad. And today our presenters for this session will be Diveesh Singh, who is a Sidak alumni of 2017 as well as 2018, and actually came back in 2019 as a facilitator and a TA for Sikhi 101. I've had the pleasure of working with Diveesh since 2017, and I look forward to his presentation today with all of you. We also have Kiran Kaur from our previous presentation as well, and she'll be joining us here. As mentioned, she is also an alumni, and so this is going to be, this session is entirely run by our alumni. So you'll get to see the sorts of the background that they've gained at Sidak and how it comes to play within this session. Satprit Kaur is also someone that I met at Sidak in 2014. She's a fellow teacher, and so we've connected on many levels through our work with at Sidak as well as through teaching. And so you can see that although we live hours away from each other, she's close to Seattle and I'm closer to Vancouver, Sidak really brought us together. We wouldn't have met each other otherwise. And so we've been able to connect, as I said, not only about this, but we've been talking about our struggles as teachers and pandemic and all sorts of things. And so you do really make these great connections at Sidak. Also, during this session, Jasleen Kaur will be joining us as well. Jasleen Kaur is a alumni of 2012 and 2017. She's currently a researcher with the Sikh Research Institute and one of the presenters or facilitators for Sikhi 201. Jasleen has been working on the Guru Granth Sahib project as a researcher. And so with this session, you will be looking at Gurbani and the connection through Shabad, and Jasleen's insights that she brings in from the project, the Guru Granth Sahib project, as well as what she has learned at Sidak will definitely be reflected in this. As mentioned, this session is all on connecting through Shabad. It's going to be quite personal. And as you'll get to see, our presenters will share a bit about how they've connected on a personal level with Shabad, their connection to Guru, and you will also get the chance to experience that for yourself as well. So I'm excited for all of you to participate in this session, and just remember that this is a safe space, that this is a learning environment for all of you, and please enjoy. So I will turn this over to our presentation team.
Cool. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I think we're just getting the slides up. Satprit, I think, has them. Cool. All right. So as Anu mentioned, this is a workshop where we're going to try to take a continuation of what we were talking about in the last session with cultivating a relationship with oneness and with Guru, and do this in a personally reflective way and engage with some Gurbani. So this workshop is going to ask you to sit with Bani, and it doesn't matter if you've never attempted translating or if this is something completely new to you. It's all a journey and everybody is somewhere along it. And so there's no experience required. And so next slide, please. We'll go to the beginning. So what is translating? What is interpreting? What is transcreating? And sorry, just had a glitch there. Okay, can you hear me still, Diveesh? Cool, sorry, I'll just start that slide again. So this is an introduction to translation, interpretation, and transcreation. And so these are 3 different words that we use to understand what it means to engage with Gurbani across different languages, what is the experience of moving between one or the other, and transcreating is a word that we often use at Sidak to sort of de-emphasize the necessity for literal translation and make you think about what are the words sort of between the lines and how can we interpret this in a way that feels personal, that feels like it's the voice in my head, as opposed to like another author or another translator. So with any task like this, there is subjectivity. This is a human practice. The goal isn't for anything to be perfect, that is only found in the original Bani, the perfection. So we're going to try and be aware of our angles and our perspectives and what we may bring to the table as sort of like a tint to our translations with a few of these common challenges. So I think Diveesh is going to kick us off with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Kiran. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So what kinds of limitations do we face during translation, and how does that affect our interpretations? Well, for example, we find that in the Sikhi to the Max translations, they have some amount of influence from like Abrahamic religions. We find that Har, Guru, or any other way to address the divine has been translated to Lord. The word Lord holds certain connotations and evokes certain images in the reader's head versus other choices, divine, et cetera, et cetera. Similarly, we'll also see translations that have some Hindu influences there, some Indic influences, dharmic influences, yogic influences. But beyond the external religious influence, we're also just inherently limited by just the nature of going from language to language. When we try to create something in a new language, we lose some of the original nuance, the implications, since we're limited by the expressive power of the target language. So how, for example, do we capture the essence of Balihari in just a few words? Right? There's a lot behind it. In fact, when authors write these translations, they're inherently bringing some of their own experiences and perspectives in there as well. And that's something we have to understand when trying to interpret those translations. Is the writer coming from a political angle, an academic angle, a spiritual one? These all are things that we have to keep in mind when we read these translations. And everyone has these things that they bring when they write translations. Sikhi to the Max authors, Sikhi, anyone. And these limitations aren't necessarily a bad thing, right? We have to focus on that. Even though we have these limitations, the end goal is that we want the Bani to be understandable and we want it to be relevant. And finally, at the end of the day, right, Shabad is infinite and we're basically limited by the bounds of our own consciousness. We are simply just finite. And Bani can't be expressed in one translation, but being limited does not mean that we shouldn't attempt to translate. We should constantly be exploring, we should constantly be engaging, and through this engagement is how we develop. And that's what leads to growth. And it's key to the sort of, I guess, experiential component of interacting with Shabad. Next slide, please. So I've been mentioning a fair amount of limitations and translations based on varying from author to author and people bringing in their personal sort of experiences into the mix. So let's take a few of these translations actually side by side and talk a little bit about the differences. So the first thing that stuck out to me was, if you look at the first paragraph, how can I go to enjoy my husband, Lord? That's in the Sikhi to the Max translation. In this case, we use the word Lord. The usage of the word Lord here takes away from that, that meaning that we get from divine instead, and we see that Abrahamic influence in there. Also, in the second paragraph, here's somewhere we can talk a little bit more about this idea of how, despite the limitations, we're still getting to a point where the Shabad becomes a little bit more relevant. If you look at this literal translation in the Sikhi to the Max one, cranes streaking overhead in the sky. But what does that actually mean, right? Like, am I this metaphorical crane? Like, why am I shrieking? Like, what is this? And so if you take a look at the rightmost column in the transcreation, you'll note this idea of crane streaking becomes a little bit more relevant when you actually dig down and try to explain the analogy. Growing old and graying hairs is a much more relatable idea for us. Finally, in the last paragraph, if you take a look at the middle column, you can see this idea of comparing Suhagan and Duhagan. And the first thing I want to point out is that in the Sikhi to the Max translation, we see Suhagan referred to as virtuous soul bride and Duhagan is unworthy. But in the Guru Granth Sahib Project translation, we actually see them just use the words Duhagan and Suhagan. So why didn't they translate it? They just used the original words. So in some cases, there's actually so much cultural context behind the word that it's actually difficult to capture that full meaning in the sentence itself. In those cases, it's been perfectly acceptable to just use the original word and then have a footnote that goes into greater detail. I guess finally, we can take this a little bit further. Don't want to take too much time, but if you read the translation on the left in the last paragraph, you give all your knights to the virtuous soul brides. I know that I am unworthy, but isn't there a knight for me as well? So when I read this translation, I see this contrast of the virtuous soul bride and someone who is unworthy. And the virtuous soul bride has access to these knights, but the unworthy one doesn't, or wonders whether it's actually available for her. So I got a little bit confused. I was like, what is this virtuous soul bride? You know, am I unworthy? Like, am I left wondering whether or not there is a knight for me? And if you look at the Guru Granth Sahib Project 1, they paint a slightly different picture. This idea of knight becomes grace. You see this line, grant me, the separated seeker, a moment of grace as well. And so we notice that like the difference here is that the Duhagan is saying, you know, grant me this moment of grace. You know, I may not be perfect, but I still have that ability to ask for that grace. And it's basically a core idea in Sikhi that, you know, the grace is all around us. I just have to be willing to feel it. So I guess the point that I'm trying to illustrate here is that if you look at different translations, you'll get a very different, not a very different idea, but you'll get slightly different nuances across them. And at the end of the day, we want these translations to be not only understandable, but also relevant. And in the pursuit of trying to make these more accessible, that is where our growth is going to be. So next slide, please.
Cool. So I'm going to address a couple of other things. One is common error. So in this case, it's referring to the incorrect superimposing of context that may or may not have existed in the original Bani that we are applying from our own perspectives. And so I've put some examples here from Iyer Bani translations, because I know that's a really common, that's how I personally use the most common translation that I have access to. So this issue is most commonly seen when we're trying to translate names or descriptions of the divine or of Guru. And so the first one is Ram. And so the first example that I've put here is Ram. And so Ram can be the Hindu word for God, Ram, or it could be Ram, the historical Ram, the Ram and Sita, or in this case of the first look that I've put here with Ramaya, that's a completely different description of God that might not involve any of those other ones. And so that Ramaya sometimes means like the charmer or someone who's immersed, Ramya, in love. And so there's an entire story that's being conveyed in a word to describe the divine that's lost if you just write God or Lord or Master or any of those things. Same thing with Bhagwan, that's the next example, where that is the Hindu word for God in some cases, but also it means the adorable, that one that is adored. And so we sometimes can lose these like broader, really deep translations of the divine or how it might exist in a particular context when we use a simple English word. And sometimes that's just the case. Sometimes there isn't one English word for word that can convey the meaning, which is what Diveesh was talking about with sometimes the original words or string of words is better. Next slide, please. The next common thing that we see is gender being ascribed where it's not necessary oftentimes. So this is most common with seeing he superimposed into lines that don't necessarily have pronouns or don't have gender at all. So the gurus, in their infinite capacity to write from different perspectives, wrote from masculine and feminine and gender neutral and gender transcendent perspectives that sometimes had nothing to do with a gendered and socialized body, but rather just a human experience. And so adding in he where it doesn't necessarily belong can tint the translation to mean something different. And so the example that I've put here is a shabad that uses the word ape. And so ape, just as it is in Punjabi, is oneself, is a reflexive pronoun for the self. And so there is obviously no gender ascribed to that if it's just to the generic oneself, but in the translation it's put as he himself. And so that's again something to consider when we're reading it, because as Diveesh mentioned, there's no incorrect ascription of bias or incorrect inclusion of bias, because anyone who attempts translating is going to carry their life experiences into the way that they speak and the way that they work. But from an organizational level, if you're Sikhi to the max, if you're Agrabani, if you're an institution that disseminates this as like academic material or a way for other people to learn, there's heavy implication when you gender things heavily or when you add in other religious traditions influence in heavily. So yeah, just like extra things to think about as you go about reading other translations and to consider when you attempt your own. And Satprit is the next one.
So another thing that has an impact on translation and transcreation is the use of metaphysical symbolism. So sometimes when you translate a word into English literally, then you can lose some of the deeper meaning that's behind the concept. So for example, in Asakivar, it says, Nanak Guru na Chetani, man apne suchet, chotte til buad jio, sunye andar khet. If you were to roughly translate this line literally, it would be about how those who don't understand, or those who don't remember the Guru, and those that think of themselves as super smart and super clever are like rotten sesame seed plants that are abandoned in the field. So when I consider that translation literally, it's a little challenging for me to make sense of it, at least for myself. And there's obviously a deeper meaning behind that and deeper meaning behind that symbolism as well. And we intentionally are using the term metaphysical symbolism instead of just symbolism. And this is because to me, symbolism means that there's a deeper meaning behind the translation beyond the literal meaning. And symbolism is kind of about a comparison of one thing to another thing, like a human is like a seed. However, using the term metaphysical symbolism attaches a deeper, expansive context to the thing that's being compared. So it suggests that there's not only a deeper meaning, but that there is a divine message behind that deeper meaning. So when I think about the deeper meaning behind this line, it makes me think about questions like, what is needed to cultivate the seed in this analogy? What does it mean to be left out in the field? What does it represent if the seed is rotten? What are the implications of that? What is representing the field in this analogy? And where does the divine fit into this metaphor? And where do we as humans fit into this metaphor? And what does this line make us consider about the relationship between us and the Guru? So therefore, as important as the literal translation is, it is also important to not lose sight of the deeper metaphysical symbolism in the process of making sense of Gurbani for ourselves.
Okay, so now that we've sort of set the scene for what translating can look like and common slants that show up in such an exercise, we're going to do an activity and have all of you attempt a piece of translation. So again, I emphasize that there are no correct answers, but I think that there's something very profound about working with a line of Bani until the words that you're using and the words that you're saying to explain it to yourself are in your own voice, as opposed to somebody else telling you what something means. And that is a journey, and that's a time-consuming exercise to find your voice as it presents itself in Gurbani. But I think it's something that can make the connection much more personal. And so Sikhi to the Max and iGurbani and the Guru Granth Sahib Project and online dictionaries, any of those things are tools and ones that I definitely would encourage using and still use. But hearing something in your own voice after going through that process is something that does feel connective. And so Asakivar is the Bani that we're going to start with, and that's what the example that Satprit was just talking about comes from. The reason we chose Asakivar is because one is it's something that we work with at Sidak. And before I went to Sidak, I had never read Asakivar. I had never heard it before. I had no experience with it as a Bani. But it really is what I think could be considered a seminal text of Sikh theology. In it, Guru Nanak Sahib talks about the normal, the accepted, the traditional, the ritualistic, whatever was presented at the time that he was in this world, and shatters the notions of like what we're doing. Is it meaningful? What we're doing, is it right? What we're doing, is it in line with oneness? And it's incredible to engage with it and to see how revolutionary and how radical he was for the time that he was in. It's also a Sankti Bani, meaning that it's meant to be done in Sangat, that's meant to be done in community. And every Gurdwara everywhere around the world does this in the morning. And so we thought it would be a good place to start. So Asakivar has 24 stanzas, and we're just going to touch the first today. And within that, there's a few couplets, and we're going to work through the first together, and then give you some tools to work through the rest. So Diveesh is going to take us through the first example.
Yeah, so just some quick logistical things before we go into that. So for the translation workshops, you'll all be going on to breakout rooms of approximately 8 people, and you'll be translating you'll be focusing primarily on the second couplet of the first chapka in Asakibar. And you'll have to actively join the breakout room when the Zoom notification comes up, but we can go into that a little bit later. So if you take a look at the chat, we've sent out a Google Doc link, which allows you to make a copy and add your own notes. Also, in case you don't have a Google account, we've also included a link to a PDF that you can just download. And so you can at least have access to the content that will help you do this exercise, and feel free to type up your notes or translations in a separate document or notes app or whatever you want. So we've provided, the way it works is we've provided each of the lines in the first chapka in both Gurmukhi and English, as well as the translations of each of the individual words themselves. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide, sorry. Yeah, and so we have the translations as well as the individual words themselves, of the individual words themselves, sorry. And your job is to basically string them together in a translation. So next slide, please. Oh, sorry, keep it on this one. So if you take a look, right, like if we take a look at just the first tuk or first segment, Balihari Gur Apne. So I see Balihari and I look in the word bank. Okay, Balihari is sacrifice or adoration. Okay, then Gur Apne. Gur is guru or wisdom. Apne means to my. So I can sort of, okay, I can combine that into to my. So you can kind of see how this stringing together process works. And you basically are doing that for all the lines that we've provided. Again, primarily focusing on the second couplet. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, the interesting aspect of this is sort of how you choose to string them together. So Satprit, Kiran, and I, we had all access to all of the same resources, all the same word bank, everything. Yet when we made the translations on our own, you know, they have generally maybe like the same idea, but if you look at the words we use to express different concepts, how we phrase the sentence, it is very different. And I feel like that's the beautiful part of translation, right? Like I personally had to sit for maybe 10 minutes and figure out, okay, how do I actually want to describe Balihari? Like, is sacrifice? Is it adoration? How do I really capture that nuance? And I guess I ended up settling on, I lovingly give my whole self. But I guess this goes to show that, right? Like it's not just this idea of, okay, this word means this, I'm going to put this. It's really like trying to understand how this speaks to you and how you can take these literal translations and turn that into something that you actually resonate with. Cool. Next slide.
So in addition to having the support of the glossary, you will also have the support of your fellow participants. So I would encourage you all to work together and share your ideas with each other so you can bounce ideas off one another and hear multiple perspectives. So since we're working in groups, we'd like to have a couple of norms for all of us to follow. So first of all, we are all learning together. We are all learning. So please make space for people to feel safe and to feel comfortable engaging and to share their ideas. So please make space. Secondly, we all have the divine force within us, and we have really important insights to share. So please try to be brave and engage in this activity. And we encourage you to take space and share with others as well. So this activity is both collaborative as well as deeply personal. So please value the ideas of others while also valuing your own. There is no one right answer to this activity. It is okay and expected and actually necessary to have slightly different transcreations. And we also want to mention that it is okay to have moments of silence as people take time to reflect during this activity. It could be helpful to give folks in your group a couple minutes to think individually before coming together as a group to share out loud. So it is okay to have some reflection time as well. And so to help us engage in this activity, we're going to ask that a couple folks within your breakout room volunteer for the following groups just to support your group. So first, we would love for one person to be the screen sharer. So we'd like this person to share their screen on Zoom so everyone in the breakout room can see the activity at the same time. We'd also like one person to be the recorder. So we'd like for you to write down your group's ideas. Each person can write down their own ideas on their own activity sheet, but it would be great if the recorder could write down their group's ideas as a whole so that we have it when we come back as a large group, because we're going to ask you to share out about the second slok. We'd also like one person to be a reporter. So this person's going to share your group's ideas out loud at the end about the second slok. And then we'd also like someone in your group to be the floor manager. So we'd like this person to help make sure that everyone in your group has a chance to share if they'd like to, and invite people into the conversation. So-and-so, what do you think? So as you all are doing this, we will be hopping into your rooms if you have any questions or need any assistance, but also please don't hesitate to click the Ask for Help button if you need anything. So your goal for this activity is to gain a deeper understanding of Gurbani for yourself. So it is okay if you don't finish the entire workbook. We actually don't expect you to, but we would really like for you to make sure that you engage with the second slok especially. So we would rather that you spend time being thoughtful about translating and making meaning for yourselves rather than rushing through. So we intentionally gave you more than we thought you could finish in this time, just so you could also continue this process individually after the session is over. So with that, at this time, you should be getting a prompt to join your breakout room. So please click on that and good luck. Thank you all so much for engaging in this process with one another. I had the privilege of listening to a really amazing conversation in the group that I was in, and I'm sure other groups had great conversations too. So truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your bravery and your engagement and your thoughtfulness while engaging in this process. And so what we'd like to do now is have a little bit of time to hear from several different groups so you can hear across groups how you were making meaning for yourselves. So what you'll see right now in the chat is a link, pardon me, you'll see a link to the Padlet in the chat. And so what we'd like for you to do is the recorder in your group, if you could please write down what your group came up with in your breakout room, that would be great. If your group was able to get to the second slok of Jeso Chanda Ogovehe, if you could share that, that would be awesome. But if you didn't get there, no worries, just share what you got, and that's totally fine. And for the second column of the Padlet, there is another question. So the second question on the Padlet is, did you encounter any of the common challenges from the beginning? And if so, briefly describe what the challenge was while your group was doing this process. While recorders are recording for the first column and while everyone is reflecting for the second column, I'd love to have a couple people share out from your breakout room. So reporters, if you wouldn't mind sharing out, what were some of the translations and transcreations that your group came up with? And if you're able to share the second slok, awesome. If you didn't get to that, no worries, to share what you all came up with. So with that, would breakout room 1 be willing to share out first? Okay, no worries. You can totally, we can come back to breakout room 1. Is there a group that would like to get us started?
Mannat and I we can do group 4.
Perfect, thank you.
So for Chakka 1, we got to another Chakka, but I think Puneet Singh has, he was a reporter, so he has it written, but I can see the first Chakka on my screen, so I can start with that. We came up with the combined light of 1,000 suns radiating with hundreds of moons in the sky. And despite the presence of this physical light, without the Guru, there will always be extreme spiritual darkness. So what we found ourselves coming to was a difference between physical light and spiritual light, and we wanted to make that distinction in our translation. And then what what we were talking about was that there might be the light of 100 moons or 1,000 suns, or and 1,000 suns. We talked a little bit about the or and. There will always be darkness without Guru's light. And I think that one like challenge that we found ourselves coming to a lot, but I think our team did like a really we had like a really good way of like going around it, was we kept on bumping into pronouns and like us using those or it's and theys, but we were trying to not use that. So definitely like in some of our other chakra like definitions or transcreations, we were trying to not bump into those, but that was definitely challenging.
Thank you so much for sharing. Oh, sorry, keep going.
No, I was just gonna say, Mannat, if we can have like Puneet bring up the other chakra, we can talk about that. Unless you guys want to like do that later.
Slok 2 is there. I see it on the screen.
Yeah, I think it's in the Padlet. We were just spending some time talking about why Guru Sahib specifically chose to use the sesame seed in this slok, and how it's sort of the idea of illusion, and you could be filled with the seed inside, or you could be filled with swa or ash. And we also talked about the idea of following Guru's mat versus manmat, and how that can lead you down two different roads.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I love like the perspective that you all are bringing into this. So thank you. Would another group like to follow up? So thank you, Breakout Room 4.
Sorry, I think my group might have been group 1. We just didn't realize. I think so for ours, for the beginning, the first line of Jai So Chanda Ugve Suraj Chade Hazar. So I think ours was, this part was really literal, and we were thinking if hundreds of moons rise, then thousands of suns will also rise. And this idea of like literally that is what like kind of what happens. There's all this natural light that happens. It's a part of life that happens daily. And then the next line is Ette chanan hundia gurbin gor andar. So it's like despite all this, literally like despite the presence of all this light, without the guru's wisdom, there's extreme darkness and ignorance. So like all this light happens, but without the guru's wisdom, without the guru, we are all left in this darkness. And I think beyond like a spiritual one, just like generally a darkness within the mind and a general ignorance of like the true meaning of life, I guess you could say. And this idea of being aware, both spiritually aware, but just aware in general of life. So I think, beyond nature's light, without the guru, we're living in this darkness within our mind. So
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, and for your reflections with that.
It's crazy how the same lines are eliciting very different understandings or different interpretations, and that's beautiful.
I think Untitled Singh, are you raising your hand? I can unmute.
Yes, I am. Somehow I'm not able to start my video. I don't know.
Oh, it's not for you.
Yeah, I wasn't able to do in the session. I mean, like in the breakout area as well. I think I overpowered the breakout area as well. So Diveesh, I would like to take this opportunity and to just share what we discussed there as well. So we spent a lot of time on the first salok. I don't know if we had to start with the second salok, but we started with the first one, and we did a lot of brainstorming on that, and the immediate discussion that came were starting from the purpose of life. Somewhere we together felt that Jan Manas Te Devte Kiye is explaining and sharing us the wall that we have between us as humans, manifestation, and the Jot, and kiv sichara hoye kiv kude tutte pal, and to break that wall is something that Akal Purakh doesn't have a designated time that, okay, you have to read so many banis, you have to, do so many taps, because in the Hindu Dharma it is written, in all of those Vedas that, there are certain number of japs that you have to do to attain a certain riddhi, siddhi and a state of being. But Guru is helping us that he's so powerful that it would take not just a blink of an eye for the Lord to break that wall for us. And then the first line actually brought us discussion on the word Balihari. Yes, we had for the second question that we have in the screen, that were there any challenges that we faced, or the limitations that we faced while understanding any word? Yes, Bilahari was the word, wherein as a group we thought that a sacrifice and adoration was somewhere not being related. But I think the insights brought to that, that whenever we adore someone, we by default, in prem, that we balihare to that person, vare vare jana us paramatma te, and kede paramatma te jo mera apna hai. I mean, so that was balihari gur apne. So those were the words that brought our attention. Then we got the opportunity for a few minutes to go to Je So Chanda Ogwe, Suraj Chade Hajar, Ite Chanan Hondia Gurbir Kor Handar, and we tried to link this salok with the upper one. That now what Guru is explaining to us is that, okay, that Guru is ever capable to transform us from Manas to the Jot Sarup, but there are so many other communities, so many other dharmas, so many other ways, so many other riddhi siddhi and these chanans out there who would make you believe that, okay, do this yoga asana, or do this kind of meditation practice, and that's when you would go inside yourself, and you would be able to attain and experience the Lord. So we interpreted the moon and the Suraj, and the Chanan that was already present there was different ways of uh, getting the experience of Lord, which were already there. But what Akal Purkh, what Nanak Pasha is saying, that no matter so many, whatever ways are available there, without the true Guru, without the Shabad of the Guru, without his name, these all chanans are just nothing. They're just not taking you to the right direction. So we just related that the devta that Jot Sarup the first is doing, the Kalpurik is doing, is again because of him only, that because of the Guru Shabad only, that can be attained. He's just reiterating the stuff and making us believe that don't fall into the trap of, if someone is selling the idea that I would, transform you to Manas to Devta, please don't go to that trap, and bring yourselves together to the Guru and to the prem of Akal Purakh and Guru Granth Sahib Ji. So I think I concluded the session here. Divesh, if you had anything else to please share, please do that. But this is something that we brainstormed and discussed.
Yeah, no, thanks, Angad. That was very, we had a very in-depth discussion about this portion. Should we maybe wrap up this discussion of this part and maybe go on to more of the common challenges area, if anyone had more thoughts on that, or if anyone else wanted.
I think this is actually a perfect segue, because what Angad was just talking about that is metaphysical symbolism. That is an example of that, what we were talking about with what Satprit was exploring earlier, where if Guru is light, is the symbol, what is the deeper meaning? That there could be other paths that are illuminated doesn't mean that everyone is the one that we're looking for, things like that. And so that was a great segue into the next question about if any of the things that we talked about showed up. I don't know if anyone put those in the Padlet, but if anyone came across any of the things that we had talked about with bias, or about other traditions or gender, or any of the ways that we had talked about bringing our personal context into our translation, if anyone had anything to add. I see someone has a hand up. Not very well.
Yes, I
Yeah,
should.
go ahead.
Thanks, Kiran. Thanks everybody else who's here. We were in group number 2 and we did, sorry, I'm not answering your question. I'm just wanted to give a little bit of context in terms of what our team discussed as well. So we did Mahala Duja, which was, as we've already discussed, you know, the literal translation we talked about was, you know, if there are 100 moons arise, thousands of sun ascends, despite so many light sources, there will still be darkness without the guru. And as you mentioned, and as others have mentioned, that the deeper thing that we really dived into was like, what is really guru, right? What is, because in the translation it said guru was, it said it's a guru, sorry, gur is guru and guru is also, it said wisdom. So we had a deeper conversation about that, because when we think about guru, we always think about something that's outside of us, that's something external, that's something physical. And in this context, you know, we discussed that the suns and the moons represent an external light, and it's talking about an internal light as well, which is the guru's wisdom, which can be physical, it can be non-physical, it's just anything that's going to help us, you know, lead the way and live a better life and understand the true meaning of what this life is all about. And it can come in so many different forms. So we really dived deeper into that, and it was a really thoughtful and engaging conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, there's so much there, right? Like, and I like this sort of contrast of the external light that you brought up versus the sort of, I guess, internal light, and how we go about, you know, exploring that, and how we go about sort of searching for that internal light, despite, you know, it not being, I guess, despite all these like other external kinds of lights, you know, how do we sort of value that internal light? So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. Because this is extremely important, because we talk about, sorry, because when we talk about guru, even in this case, when we think about it, we still think about something outside, or like it's something outside that's going to bring light. And then the gurus, the only thing they taught us was there's a light within you, recognize that. And I think Any Kaur, you know, she had brought that up last time in the conference, which said, "Man tu jot sarup hai apna mool pachan," and that's the true light that the gurus are trying to show us.
If I could just weigh in a little bit on something that I got to sort of witness a little bit of a conversation about, was a sesame seed. And have we gotten there yet? Can I go there? Okay. Yeah, so the question of like why the sesame seed came up, and somebody had just listened to some kata or something that was about how sesame seeds are specifically like used, maybe probably because when we look at them, we might not know like what the sort of internal state is of the sesame seed. Like sesame seeds that are rotten can still bloom and sort of appear to be fine. And so the like symbolism of that was discussed very briefly, but I thought that was like it was like watching a replay of what like the Guru Granth Sahib team talked about when we were parsing that through too. So that was kind of cool of like, what is the implication there? And then a follow-up that was made was the word barren was added in front of field. They said the field was barren. And then somebody else said, but I don't think that that is true. Because if we say that the field is barren, like what is that insinuating? Is it insinuating that like we are past the point of no return? Like once you're kind of rotting on the inside or rotten on the inside, then there's no going back? Or is there always like potential for some kind of blooming that is indicative of like a healthy seed? Is that like still possible? And so even though it was like very brief in our conversation, or in their conversation that I got to witness, it was like very, yeah, it was really lovely to see them think more about like even the small words that we're adding in, or like changing, what those implications are, and how that relates to like larger ideas that we have, you know, in the Sikh paradigm of like what grace is and what growth is on all of our journeys. So yeah, that was just something I wanted to add.
There's, as always, there is a lot to break down in each slug. I think Kiran was also like, I don't know if it was like she brought it up in the presentation or if it was just like something we were talking about, but there's like there's just so much to unpack with Asakivara, and that's why it's like another really good Bani to explore with this sort of exercise as well, right? Like, because you can take the literal, but then you can also like go really deep like Jasleen went. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jasleen. Should we maybe move on to some more free-form discussion?
Yeah, so cool. So we can the last chunk of this session is just going to be a little bit of a reflective discussion on how this exercise went for you, because for some people, I'm sure it was the first time doing it, and for some people, maybe it was somewhere along your journey of translating. And so given that, and given we all went through the same thing, we just want to know how that was as like an emotional experience, if it was something that was empowering or something that felt intimidating or something that's maybe now a little less intimidating. But anyone is welcome to turn their camera on or raise their hand or however you would like, but we do want to hear what it was like. Something easy, something difficult, something new, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I had at least one comment in that when our group started doing some of the translations, we found that we originally started by trying to translate each word and try to identify, okay, which one of these words most accurately represents potentially the emotion that we're trying to get out of this line. And by trying to like identify each word one at a time, it was kind of, at least I found it kind of difficult to string them together in some coherent way. And it was much more useful to try and read the entire line. I don't know if this really makes sense, but like reading the entire line made and like trying to identify like the major words of a line and their relationship with one another kind of helps making translations flow much better, or at least make them make more sense to what the message is that's trying to be delivered there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it can be intimidating to look at lines in their entirety because it's like, this is a whole string of words that I don't know. But I think somebody asked a question in the chat about like inserting Guru's context versus personal context and like how to weigh the two together and make sure we're not over inserting our own or under inserting the Guru's. And so I think that's like part of that balance is to look at things in their entirety and try not to cherry pick where possible, because isolating lines on their own can create different versions of the story. And I don't think it's something to like worry about where it's like, oh my God, is this too personal? Because I think that's part of the point. Like it's supposed to be your engagement with Bonnie and your personal journey. So kind of answered that question there, but there's a couple people who have their hands raised. I don't know who was first. Diveesh, if you want to take that.
Yeah, I think Angad was first. Angad, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, so, okay. I'll just start my webcam. Okay. So the last 90 minutes have been really amazing for me. I have to accept that I am too weak in history, in Sikh history especially. I have bought a lot of books, but I honestly don't read them. I am more inclined towards reading Shabad, Guru Granth Sahib Ji, their meanings, but I somewhere realized between these 90 minutes that how important is reading Sikh history, wherein we actually see how to practically implement the meanings. Because today what the challenge that we are talking about is that suppose if we understand Punjabi, Gurbani is something that you could relate to it, and certain words are so easy and we use in our daily lives. But when we try to interpret in English language, especially from India I am, so since this is not what the common language we have, so that's where the challenge comes up for translating and believing it, and the wordplay that comes in. Although I have all those apps, but I never read the English version because because of my, you can say, low vocabulary, or probably I just don't relate to it somewhere. Because if I say the word Sajanada, I mean, like, how on earth can any language just explain the meaning of Sajanara? So these 90 minutes has helped me really to answer the alarming question with which I came to this session, was that how practically I can implement Gurbani in my life. That today, if I say that Jeso Chanda Ugve, for me, what is the Chand today? What is the Suraj for me today? And how that Guru is helping me, to understand that that wherever you are being attached is not something which is right, and you should be attaching to something else. Not attaching, I mean, sorry for using those words, but to be inclined to the Guru. And I felt that these meanings keep on changing. As a child, it will be different meaning, and uh, if you have friends, it will be a different meaning for you. When you are at the parental age, it will be different. So it's so personal. I think someone also mentioned here that it's so personal. And one thing also I learned, that we uh, there are meanings which are written by the professors as well. Professor Sahib Singh ji, of course, he had his own avastha, and I can surely get inspired from that avastha. But currently, there will be chances that I will not be able to relate to it. So just understand the basic meaning, basic understanding, and then go back inside your mind and ask the Guru, and do ardas to Guru, that Guru, please help me understand this. So these 90 minutes have been really, really amazing, and thank you everyone for this opportunity. And I love these brainstorming session. I don't know why. If you guys could please arrange these sessions, let's just do something sort of that, one Shabad, 2 lines, and let everyone brainstorm, bring their personal contexts, and just learn from it. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Angad. Yeah, that I'm glad that this is an activity that resonated with you, and you touched on a really important point about, the Shabad changes as you grow older and you have different experiences, and that's kind of where that personal angle comes from. I want to give other people a chance to talk as well. So Gularbir, I think you had your hand up for a while, so go ahead and chime in.
I'm gonna let Kola speak first. She was in my group, and the thing that I was gonna say, she actually spoke first. So I'm gonna let her go ahead first.
Oh, thank you so much, Kumar Beach. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for arranging this. This is very special to me, as this is my first time to reading Gurbani like properly. I haven't done that before, so this wasn't easy. Like, it took me more time to understand things than the other participants, I think so. So, but it's really, I'm really feeling empowered. So thank you so much. And I'll definitely want to join more sessions like this, and I hope to be in touch.
Yeah, no, and again, right, like it's a very personal thing. There's no like, this person is better than me, or they've done this before, so they're like, it's all like your desire to connect, right? And that's the main thing.
Yeah, thank you.
So we were in group 5, and the Shabad that we'd been given was Balhari Gur Apne Dyohari Sadvar Janmanas Te Devte Kiye Kart Na Lagi Var. We unfortunately couldn't get to the second part of it. We were stuck on Balihari for, I think, a good 15 minutes of like just a good half of that chunk. I remember, I think it was Angad and his group, they mentioned they were talking about Balihari as well. So my group, we kind of ignored for the most part the translation that was given to us, and we kind of started thinking about what it could mean for us personally. And so one of the things that one of the themes that came up was that sacrifice here is a kind of a harsh word. Like, we all have connotations of what sacrifice could mean, whether it's throughout Sikh history or whether like what the literal definition of that word is on its own. One really interesting thing Kola had mentioned was she related it to this phrase in Punjabi, Sadke Jama. Now, I'll be honest, I've heard that a lot. I don't really know what it means. It's kind of attributed to like that gesture that you do to someone. You're like, Sadke Jama. And she was explaining how it's kind of, or like what we decided that it could mean was like just giving all of yourself to the Guru. So when we say like sacrifice, in a way, that is what you're doing. Like sacrifice is maybe more physical, and like I'm physically sacrificing my life for you, but it's also giving my heart, my soul, my body, my time, my energy, like giving every single thing that I have to you. I thought that was a really interesting interpretation that we all came up with. And I wanted to share that. So thank you, Kola, for that. And the rest of my team. They're awesome.
Yay, awesome teams. Yeah, so I think unfortunately we're running up against time here, but Jasleen, if you want to wrap up a little bit.
Okay. I guess everybody raised points that I think that I would have raised anyway, so that's great. It tells me that like these sessions were really generative, and that's really nice to see. I think what I would say is helpful to remember, because history was brought up, and then also this idea of like Guru as just the embodied form was brought up throughout today. And I think if we can get to a place where we're thinking about Shabad Guru, then we can understand Shabad as this constantly kind of living thing, and we can walk with it. It will change in our understanding over time, from a week to a month to a year. You can revisit things and read them completely differently. They have like lines will have certain things to tell you in certain moments. And so if we can think about it more as a thing that we walk with and change with, I think that's more helpful when we're going to look at translations. The point that was brought up about history, I think, is really important, because we were just talking about Suluk Mahela Noma this morning in a different session, and the question came up of, this idea that Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib was like really political in the first half of his life, and then in the second half, it was all meditation. And, in Suluk Mahela Noma, there's all these references to like detachment and renunciation, and what does that mean? And so a thing that we talked about a lot when we were doing that translation and transcreation and commentary is like, well, look at the Guru's life. Was the Guru sitting in a forest and like not having a family and not having anything to do with their family at the end of their life? Or like, is that something that we know deep down to not be true? And if that's the case, then how are we reading these lines even about like renunciation? So yes, there's like a dialogue that happens there too. So I think, keeping all of those things in mind, and then also asking the kinds of questions that might seem really nitpicky about like what a particular word could mean, or what a particular translation word connotes. Like that question might seem kind of annoying and nitpicky, but it makes a huge difference. So the conversation that people had about whether it's and or for the moon and the sun is not a waste of time. The conversation about like why a sesame seed is definitely not a waste of time. So those things that maybe feel kind of tedious, those single word conversations that we've had as a team are the ones that I carry with me always, and that I return to always, because those simple words have so much to teach us. So that's all I'll say. I think, it was like a pleasure. I know I popped in kind of late, but it was a pleasure to witness everybody working through things together. So please keep doing it. Keep sitting with Shabad Guru and see how it changes you.
Yeah, and thank you everyone. Again, we've said this a few different times, but thank you truly everyone for participating and for engaging and for offering your insights. Again, it's an amazing thing to meet people and be okay with having this conversation and be willing to go so deep into like a personal relationship with something like Guru and something like Gurbani. So thank you for joining us, and we hope that you walk away with something after these 90 minutes that will provide something for you in the future. So with that, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and I think we give it back to Anu.
Yes, thank you. Wow, it's amazing to hear all of you and how this has been quite a formational sort of session for those of you who have joined us for the 90 minutes. This is what we continue with at Sidak. This is the 2 weeks of continuation of this sort of learning and experience. Just a couple of things on as we're sharing from from a personal perspective. I find that translating Shabad to be quite an emotional experience, and some of you may have experienced that as well. This is something that touches your soul, touches your heart. And many times, and others did mention this in the comments as well, it takes time, and it takes patience. And so if you were struggling with the timing and thinking that you were not getting it as fast as others, know that that is the process, and it does take time. It definitely leaves you in a very contemplative state. So it's so great to hear everyone has enjoyed that. We're going to move next into our next presenter, who will be Harinder Singh. Harinder Singh is the co-founder of Sikh Research Institute, as well as the person who envisions Sidak, and so has the longest standing relationship with Sidak. And so I'd like to ask him to come on as we kind of delve into the where Sidak is now, where it came from, and where it will take us to. So Harinder Singh.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Well, you know, we've been starting with the Fatehs, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and I'll start with the interpretation of that. You know, if you take that in today's parlance in English, that would mean sovereign is of awesome wisdom, and victory is also of the awesome wisdom. And if you notice, this Vaheguru part is the awesome wisdom part, and that's the continuity you heard in earlier two sessions. In Sidak, that's the continuity we're trying to provide a dimension of. But keep in mind that every discussion of sovereignty, which is what Khalsa's interpretation becomes, and Fateh, interpretation would be victory, is bound together, linked directly, fully with this idea of awesome wisdom. So, you know, this discussions all of you have been having about divine force, guru, wisdom, connection, grace, essentially this oneness idea. But I do want to focus a little bit on this oneness a bit to start with. This oneness, if we spell it out, can be potentially funny. I mean funny in an awkward sense, because what does it really mean? It could be a very new age-ish fad thing. You know, it's like someone saying, I used to think I was indecisive, but now I'm not so sure. I don't know if you get the joke, but that's the indecisiveness continues, but it sounded good. So whereas when Guru Nanak said Ikko Onkar, when he put Ik in Ikko Onkar, Ik only means with the numeral 1, it's very clear and it's very decisive. It means all, without exception, have access to that one force. All 7.5 billion people on this earth currently. That includes the darkest ones, the flawed ones, the fraudulent ones, people like me. We got a lot of our own challenges. So this access to Ik Onkar, the one Ik here, the decisive one, the numeral one, actually that's what it's saying. In case you're wondering, no, I don't suffer from insanity here. I enjoy every moment of it when I'm especially reading Gurbani, and how it's disrupting every thought we have had. And that's Sidak, this is part of the disruption we are interested in, the disruption which Guru Nanak brought. With that level of clarity, humor, nuancing, feelings, emotions, learnings, and countering and transcending all the isms of the world. So even today's Hukum, when I read it this morning, you know, it was from Guru Ram Das Pacha. And we do Hukum interpretations at Sidak as well. Because we learn from you just did a Shabad. And the Hukum, when I read it this morning, it was in Rag Suhi. So that already tells me I don't need to think about that. Rag Suhi is all about love. Rag Suhi is when I'm drenched in love. When I have actually not just drenched, I have become of that color, that deep crimson. And all he says in there, Guru Ram Das Patsha, he says, you know, I mean, I'm reflecting on it. His line is, Darshan har dekhan kehta hai, which means, when I'm looking at that, I was asking it myself, am I interested in that vision, the vision of the Har, which is the fear eliminator, the all-pervasive, the light, the force? Am I even interested in that vision, or I have created some other fixation of whatever the God, Lord, or whatever it means to be a believer or a cynic or a atheist or a Gnostic? We got all sorts of things going on. And we participate in those discussions, in proving and disproving those things. But Guru Nanak is, in this case, Guru Ram Das Patsha is actually saying, I'm interested in the vision of the Har. And Har literally means the one who eliminates the fears. And he says, if I'm interested in that, and Guru Ram Das Patsha is saying, and I'm reflecting on it, he says, if I'm interested in this, what do I do? And he says, well, then I feel the grace, and I connect with the wisdom, connect with the Guru. And then I contemplate on Harinam, which basically means I identify with the force, that Ikonkar force. So if we are looking to eliminate fears in our lives, that's the question we would ask based on today's question. And honestly, in Sidak, then what we try to do is take these ideas of connecting with the Bani, learning with the Bani, and apply it, make it relevant and current. So fear of death is overwhelming us right now. India is on our minds. There's a COVID devastation. There are piles of dead bodies outside cremation grounds. And in the roads in front of hospitals, there is oxygen deprivation. And then on top of it, we have farmers and labor movements, which started as a protest, and all these Punjab and Sikh factors in there, where they're not even allowing oxygen to Punjab from Pakistan. So death, the fear of death, this is what's in the news if you are connected to India right now. Now, if you look at from a global angle also, Gaza is also on our minds. So we got to be able to apply these things, whatever we're learning. Israel, Palestine, Zionism, Hamas, the role of America, and then allyship throughout the world for any real two-state solution that actually will stop killings. That's on our minds. It's continuing. These forces are continuing to create these pile of death bodies in different ways. Personally, in this COVID era, we have another fear which has amplified now, fear of being alone, fear that we might remain separated in our relationships. And that frightens us. It's been accentuated with a number of conversations which you probably have been part of, and I've read upon, and I'm personally going through many things. So our relationships are on our minds. The Bani is also about that. Whether it's with my spouse or spouse-to-be, my siblings, my parents, my friends, my spirituality, my guru, my divine, my force. And the question I keep asking is, will I experience or continue to experience love in a human relationship? Or will I ever experience eternal love in a divine relationship? That's the real separation in Gurbani. But these are real questions for us, for the globe. And that's what we do at Sidak. We learn from the eternal wisdom to conquer our fears at personal levels first. This is where we explore Ikonkar, Naam, Guru, Shabad, as all of you did today. We connect through the shared collective Sikhi experience. We learn the Shabad and we feel the Naam. We are the imperfect ones, right? The separated ones, the dark ones. Yes, the darkest ones too also have access to Ikonkar and Naam. It is not denied in this declaration of Ikonkar to anyone. So we also long for that connection, the intimate connection, where we discover meaning for ourselves. We discover meaning for, you discover meaning for yourself, the self which connects to the Ikonkar self. And as a result of that, we make a conscious decision at some point in our lives to become the active agents of that force. This is where, Star Wars-like analogy from 60s can help you, and the movies are still continuing if you struggle with the vocabulary of Guru Nanak, for example. So while in our facilitators today, there were many, so while we enjoy our K-pop dances or creative artistic impressions, or whether we participate in anti-supremacy rallies or support Sikh causes or build careers in technology or medicine, or we research and interpret Shabad in Guru Granth Sahib or explore dimensions of Sikh culture, or whether we're imparting knowledges to high schoolers or adults, or work as consultants or fund managers. While we do all of that, and many more other things, as some of the facilitators did today, we still remain devoted to that one force. That's the idea we are trying to bring out more in Sidak, this conviction of connection to the force. That's what we attempt to impart, I should say, to learn to conquer the fear or death, fear of unknown, the fear of separation, the fear of loneliness. And when I do allow the light to enter my being, when we do allow the Shabad to chisel our consciousness, that's when you and I become active agents of love and justice. And to do what? Well, to address the darkness in our communities and in the nations we live in. And for that, we do need trainings. We are an element of training. There are many trainings needed. Let us train ourselves to become these love-drenched warriors in all spheres of life. So we may fight for the Guru's glory, not personal glory, so we can live in the praise of the force. And I leave you with that's our aspiration for Sidak. It will continue to be as we bring more and more people. Today, you heard people from India and Pakistan, as well as from the Western Hemisphere. And may we gracefully learn to identify with Naam, which essentially is feeling the rays of light. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Harinder Singh, for that I hear the passion. I definitely hear the passion, and that I just want to highlight for all of you that is where Sidak is born out of. And those of us who have gone through Sidak, as I mentioned earlier, that spark and that passion was lit within us in order for us to continue to come back, and in order for us to continue to bring that light within us as well. We truly, truly hope that you enjoyed today's session, and we have more coming up. So for those of you who are looking for more, please watch your inboxes, watch your social media. We will be posting for upcoming events for the summer of 2021. And hopefully in 2022, we will all get to meet in person in Mission, British Columbia. It's my backyard, it's my home. I would be very, very happy to have all of you here and to experience this in a beautiful natural setting as well. But as I mentioned, please stay tuned to our social media and to our emails that will be coming in. We will be giving you more information for events to come. Just a couple of things as we wrap up for today. Just a couple of thank yous. Thank you to our facilitation team, all of the work that went in behind the scenes to pull these sessions together. It was very much appreciated, and thank you very much. Also to Jasleen Kaur. This is someone that has been behind the scenes, and many of you did not get a chance to meet her. However, none of this would have been possible without her. She has been just an incredible person to have back there, switching and turning, and how is this not happening? So Jasleen, thank you so much for being that person for all of us to connect with. And last but not least, the biggest thank you of all goes to all of you for sharing your time with us, for connecting, for being vulnerable. And we really, really hope to see you once again at some of our events. There are some that are looking for more in the next little while. Please watch for we do have on our YouTube channel, we do have past webinars as well. Our social media with Twitter and Instagram and Facebook has more content there as well, including our website that was just put into the link as well. Before you go, just a quick thing. We will be sending out a feedback form in the next few hours. I would really encourage you all to fill that form out, as it is an opportunity for you to tell us how the session went, and for us in terms of our planning for events to come. I hope all of you have an amazing day. Thank you so much for joining us. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.